Alrighty, welcome back to Real Talk. This is a show where we talk to video production, live production, all sorts of different production people to get more information about what they do and educate people about what they do. I'm here with my good friend Ryan Hack. Is a guy that I met on Discord, and I had no idea that one, he lived close by, but also his industry is very parallel to my own. So thank you for doing this again. I really appreciate it. There's no I'm not paying you to do this, and you drove all the way
I'm
from
not getting
Louisville.
paid.
No, no, you drove all the way from Louisville. I seriously thank you for doing that.
Of course. You've got to come through,
Yeah.
especially for other people in the industry. I think our industry is absolutely full of excuses and rescheduling. So once you get that chance, you got to make it happen.
Yeah, scheduling is a big deal, and I iterated on that when I was talking to Isaiah. Is like the what they tell you about scheduling is like if you're not early, you're late. Essentially, like never be late. But also, the fact that this isn't like a 9 to 5, like it's kind of like start and go. So being punctual is like super important. But yeah, go ahead and tell us like what is your title and what are some of your responsibilities on with that title?
Sure. So I am a radio host, radio DJ, whatever you want to call it, really. The title doesn't matter too much. People tend to just know me by my name. I don't use a nickname, anything like that. But I can be heard live on two different stations in central Kentucky. One is WBRT. You can find that 97.1 FM, 1320 AM, also live in Lebanon at 94.9 FM, and worldwide at WBRTcountry.com.
The voices.
I'm not just plugging, but, simply giving a sample there. And as well, it's a duopoly station. So not only is there WBRT, a more country and local format, but we have your maybe what people tend to think of with a radio station, lots of music and a little bit of chit chat now and then, WOKH. And that is an FM station, 102.7. I do some things on WBRT. I do some things on WOKH. Either or, though, there's a lot of stuff that happens in the background. And lucky for me, there's always lots of things that need to be done. So there's never a moment where I'm sitting there wondering what it is I got to do with myself. All of it, though, kind of comes together at the end of the day and really just contributes to that sound that goes out on the airwaves. So at the end of the day, most people, they just know me as Ryan Hack, and they know that I'll be with them for the next couple hours playing some music, or that I've got their next interview for the morning show, what have you. Stuff like that. It's pretty simple when you get down to it.
Gotcha. So by background, stuff happening in the background, I'm assuming like that's just all the stuff that isn't being broadcast at that moment. Like it's like preparation or like what are some of those things that you're doing while you're not broadcasting?
Sure. Well, here's something I think anybody involved in media might understand. Unless you're getting paid the big bucks to be up on stage at Lollapalooza or something like that, even then you're going to find it there. Stuff doesn't stay working. Stuff is always falling apart, and you never have enough money for anything, that's for sure. And there's always somebody missing, something happening. So at the end of the day, kind of, especially in, local radio, things like that, you have to be pretty good at not only crisis aversion, but dealing with things that come up. The stuff breaks,
Yeah, like problem solving.
Yeah, precisely. When you say that, it sounds grander than it really is, but, when you're at a radio station, you're not only dealing with what it sounds like on the air and having to produce that, but make sure that everything is running okay, that you're able to keep producing that sound. We've got people who are involved with the station that are rarely ever heard on air, but they're out doing sales. We are a privately owned station. So you've got people out there trying to develop relationships with local businesses so that we can, offer them our services of putting their message out there, however it is they're wanting to pay for that and what sort of deal. Um, then you also have folks who are around, and perhaps you'll only hear them in the evenings, involved with stuff like local sports and things like that. And all of that is closely tied into basic stuff like, is our equipment working today? Did somebody leave this microphone in the van, which is across town right now? Um, when you get on the radio, you're not going to get on there and say, "Oh, sorry, I'm 10 minutes behind here because such and such is a lousy son of a," and
Yeah.
left
Yeah.
that one specific cable I needed behind.
Yeah.
But no, you get on there and you act like everything's all nice and wonderful, even if, the AC isn't working and there's a ceiling tile falling out on your head, something like that.
Right.
You keep it together. Um,
Well,
and
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I didn't even think like you have the most punctual possible like media job. Like that's like I would assume like radio broadcasts. It's like it starts at the specific time, and like you have to go. Like you have to be there to like ready to air. Is that
Absolutely.
yeah?
Absolutely. And that goes into another important thing, but yeah, no, with radio, you're offering a service to a listening public. You can't go on to a cable channel and see what's going to be playing an hour from now. Really, it's what people are used to. It's about trust, and that sounds like a big, oh, what do you mean trust? But people can trust that if they tune in at noon, they're going to hear news and they're going to hear local news headlines. Or they can trust if they tune in at 3 o'clock, they might catch their favorite classic country song, something like that. Um, People don't have to think and go, "Oh well, I wonder what's on today." It's a usual thing. It's held together and it works as it should. Is that the case? Does that always happen? No. But what matters is that the people behind the scenes, like myself, we do what we can to make it happen. And when we can't make it happen the way it's supposed to, the way we should, it's always better late than never, of course, is the thing. I gave an example earlier. Say you're 10 minutes behind before you usually go on. Say you go on at 10 o'clock and you wind up going on at 10:30. You get on there and you act like nothing happened. You get back to the regularly scheduled programming that people want to hear. They want to hear you because of what it is that you're offering them, but the Ryan hack that people know by listening to the radio, they don't know me and they don't want me there.
Right.
They want and we're live here on WBRT. Thanks for tuning in. They want all of that business. So.
Right. They're expecting that persona and that energy and that like kind of like smooth, I guess, communication of information and like what you'd expect from tuning into the radio station.
Well, yeah. So somebody gets in their car on their lunch break, and it's just been an awful morning. It's been terrible. The last thing they want to do when they turn their car on and it's tuned to our station is hear someone on there whining about their own problems. That's, you don't want to,
Yeah.
"Oh, sorry, guys, I was running a little behind. I slept in a little late." How much would that person give to, one, not only have had the luck of sleeping in a little today, and how much would they have wanted to, I don't know, stand in front of the microphone and smack me upside the head for bothering to complain when my job is to sit in front of a microphone and talk,
The radio station. Have you played Fallout 4?
Yeah, I have.
The really.
I know
like...
exactly what you're talking about. Yes, in
They're-
this video game, there is a storyline where a DJ is
He's just like a coward, I guess.
He's not very good at what he does. He's no confidence. So
Yeah.
it's a lot of on there, and there's a whole story about like getting his confidence back, so he sounds really good, right?
Yeah, that's pretty much it. But so about being a radio DJ, that it is like, you've probably become a little desensitized to it. It's become like a 9 to 5 job, but it is a dream job for a lot of people. So, and
Precisely.
I know I've talked to you about how you started before, and I remember you said you started like very early, like in like high school, right? So if you could just go through that again, like what that process was of actually getting into it, and and like who helped you along that path?
Right. So I guess it's August, right? So that means, I guess, technically speaking, I really started in radio like just about exactly 4 years ago. But my journey to that point started even before that. I actually think that early on in high school, most people don't know what it is they want to do at that age. They have ideas. They are obviously pressured to think about college and stuff like that. And I, at that time, didn't have any real ideas. There's a difference between having dreams and possible aspirations, but really having goals. And at one point, I had been taking some classes that really just they weren't all that important to me. They were just filling in something so I could get a credit, something like that. I like to say that I did very well when I applied myself, but I was a bit of an underachiever when it came to effort. And yet, along the way, there early on in high school, um, someone there, the principal who worked there, he's now the superintendent in the county system. He had pulled me aside once, and I thought, "Oh God, what have I done?" Um, and he goes, "Hey, what are you doing for your sixth period? What's that about? You're taking a history of visual art or something like that?" I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, uh, "Well, you're already in band. Why you don't need an art credit?" It's like, I mean, it was on my schedule. I'm not really asking questions at this point. He's like, "Meet me in my office." And he was a really awkward sort of man, so that was kind of where the conversation ended as he walked away. Absolutely loved the guy, but I was terrified, as like 14 years old or something like that, and absolutely without any of the communication skills I have now. No, but flash forward to that same day, he's like, "You don't need to be taking this class here. We'll get that handled. And what I'm going to do is we're going to go on Amazon here and we're going to buy a microphone. And I think you'd be really good at doing a podcast."
Hmm.
And
Wow.
I didn't really say much because I thought, what?
Yeah.
Where's the camera? Like, is this a joke or something? Not only was it like a thing where it's like, wow, that sounds cool, but also like, why me? Like, not from a like, oh, well, I don't deserve this. It's like, really, I know nothing about podcasting. I know nothing about, being in front of a microphone, conducting an interview, that sort of thing. To this day, I really don't know what it is that he saw there, but I do know that he did, in fact, push me in front of a microphone and he helped me find people to talk to. And I started doing podcasting my freshman year in high school. And it was obviously something that I was really figuring out myself. So,
It was for the school though, right?
no,
Oh, it wasn't.
no, I mean, so he helped me kind of pick out a theme. We had settled on something that kind of would be something acceptable, obviously, to be produced on school time. I
You're
wasn't
right.
out here like the Joe Rogan Experience talking about DMT and whatnot.
Yeah.
It was actually really, really funny. I came up with this name myself. I'm very proud of it when I was 14 years old. It was called Communicrazy. And
Okay.
it was about pulling people who were considered to be well contributing or notable members of the community or their communities, and not only talking about them, sharing their story, but then really getting into that nitty gritty of like the importance of, well, I mean, community is a buzzword, really. So, what does it actually mean? And, like, what does it mean to take part in that and be there for people and help build that something more than just yourself? And I think over the course of a couple years that I did it, it really only came to about maybe 15 episodes or so at most, I believe. Of course, towards the end, they started to get like, an hour and 30 minutes long, stuff like that. I kind of let the whole morning commute sort of time frame of about 20 to 30 minutes pass me by. But that's also because early on, the most I could really do was 20 to 30 minutes. I'd write out a big long sheet of questions ahead of time and send it to them and stuff to get them prepared. And towards the end of it, I'd maybe come up with, one or two questions that I sent to them as like a, sort of thing they're expecting to see, but I never really asked any of them because it just became more natural conversation.
Hmm.
My skills developed there. And then, if that were the end of the story, I would have been just like anybody else with a haircut like this and uh, not much other aspirations, getting about 10 listeners and
Sure.
begging for sponsorships. But
Sure. Yeah.
thankfully, somewhere along the way, I suppose my name came up in a few conversations, and I was invited to help out with our local Christmas parade we have in our town. That's just a thing that our city does. It's a little community event. But the radio station helps put that on. There's like a broadcast that goes along with it, and as the parade floats come by, it's when you're down there in the our court square downtown. These DJs are talking about the floats. They're reading off these things about the floats that the participants have provided. It's just a fun little thing where all the kids are out in the street having a good time, whatnot, and the parents are there having a little too much hot chocolate with some of our, local bourbon country special poured into
Of
it.
course. Of
But
course.
no, I was maybe a junior in high school at the time, maybe a sophomore. I can't quite remember. It's not been that long, obviously, but those exact details passed me by. I just remember it being cold. I remember having a script specifically for a certain float that my current boss now, he at the time was like really, adamant about, here, I've got the script for you. So when this float starts coming by, I want you to do the script. And so I'm there. It's been about like 20 minutes or so. And this float starts coming by. And so I reach into my pocket for the script. It's not there.
Oh.
It's gone. It's gone. So
Okay.
I basically had to wing it
Oh.
there. And, I thought it went absolutely terribly. And for most of this, I was really just there as a helping hand. If, say, something came unplugged, it's always good to have a spare set of hands when any broadcast sort of thing is happening.
Right.
Things can quickly become too big a messes for just one person while they're having to focus on other things. But by the end of it, it was like, oh, well, yeah, that went well. You did fantastic. And I'm thinking, how did I manage that? And that was kind of the end of it for a while. But thankfully, I guess I had made a decent enough impression that come my senior year in high school, I was able to snag an internship at the station.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, it was a pretty big deal. I spent a lot of time though not being in front of a microphone. When you start that sort of thing, it's Karate Kid. It's,
Yeah.
I'm not getting out there and delivering a Marconi Award-winning newscast my first day of the
Sure.
job. No, I'm glued to a filing cabinet for a week, or I'm back working on a computer system, stuff like that. Like I said, there's a lot of stuff that goes into what keeps a radio station running well, and so that what comes out on air can do so reliably. So I've spent the last 4 years steadily working up to the point where I am now. Now I'm live on air for maybe 6 hours a day at least during the week, with some stuff on the weekends as well. And that at first started, I was at the station maybe 3, 4 days a week, and I was near a microphone when I was watching someone else use it, unless it was an older microphone that needed to be reorganized in the shelving it was stored in. Um, Start off small, though, and you observe and see what's going on and prove that you can, at least in some way, be a functional and reliable human being who can show up and do what he's asked. And eventually, you know, things start to come your way. As the opportunities come, you just meet
Right.
them with the same level of courage, no matter how tired or worn out you may be that day in particular. And eventually, yeah, no, you're on air for a great deal of time, and it kind of just happens all of a sudden, really.
For
Uh,
sure.
we've got someone at our setup who's recently started with us, and I think something I said to them that I guess hadn't really crossed my mind before was about like sort of the magic of what we do. Is like you said before, this is kind of a dream job for people. And that, there are folks working up on rooftops in 100-degree weather, fixing air conditioning units and things like that. And they're maybe they've got the station on the DeWalt or in the work truck or something like that.
Right, right.
And those people, they hear what we're doing and it's just a part of their day. But for them to even consider what our job must be like, it's a far cry from what they consider to be work, you know?
Right.
So even if there is obviously work that goes into what we do, and at times a lot of it, it's still at the end of the day a fantastic service that I myself am able to take part in to provide. And it's, you know, a thousand blessings to be able to use a voice that I didn't make. This just happened, and get out and do something with it and do something for somebody, and thankfully be able to put some food on the table with it. So,
Absolutely, man. Yeah. So they gave you a chance, and you made the best out of that chance. Worked hard, came in on time, and everything. Was there an understanding that you that you wanted to be behind the microphone? Did you even want to at that time? And what was it like your first broadcast? What was the walk me through how you got from the internship to actually being in front of the microphone.
you know, it's, I think, hard to um, remember specifically when I could say really my first broadcast was. Obviously, I had done things before that were produced and listened to by people. I had done podcasts before, and there's, of course, always that presumption there that I'll be behind the microphone at some point. Um, but when you've got a whole roster of folks on air and not much need of change, you know, it's kind of, we've got this person here who's going to help out, and we're going to let that go, you know, for now. I think the first time I was live on the radio was a time I visited while I was still in school, doing sort of like a job shadowing thing. And one of our morning DJs on the WOKH station had me in there watching, and she had, you know, a pair of headphones next to me. And when she goes to go on air, she's throw those headphones on. I'm going to turn your microphone on. We're gonna talk here.
Oh wow.
And I wasn't too frightened by that. I guess that the notion of, you know, radio going out to however many people hadn't really been something that bothered me. Frankly, I was more so worried about how the headphones were going to fit on me.
Wow.
But that must have been my junior year, so before I really started there. And it was a fantastic impression on me that, you know, someone's going to just have somebody in the studio and is like, "All right, we're going to talk, you know, we're going to do something with this." That not a carefree attitude, but a clear confidence in one's ability to kind of wing it, but still make something that's worth listening to. Was
Wow.
it was enchanting, truly.
Wow.
But I think really consistently, I didn't start on air for. I mean, it's maybe been a year or two at this point that I really started being on air consistently. I did a little bit of stuff on the weekends, but that really wasn't me. I was maybe there in the studio and you had a pastor preaching on air, something like that. And a few times where some DJs had been out in the afternoons and I would go in and cover for them, which would maybe be once every couple weeks. Or if someone goes on vacation, maybe I've got a stint for 1 or 2 weeks. I do remember specifically one of our afternoon DJs was out on vacation for a couple weeks, and it was upon me to cover for that 2 full weeks. And I'd never done that before. I'd maybe, you know, one day and then, you know, 2 weeks later, hey, I need 2 to 6 covered on OKH, what have you. So, you know, starting out on Monday, it's feeling good. I'm glad to be on air, enjoying it. It's a really short time slot, and you've got a lot to get in there. So it's all kind of just really, you know, there's a checklist of things you got to do, but it's kind of laid out there for you plainly. You know, you just got to handle it and handle it well. And I think by about Wednesday, I was thinking, you know, this is feeling kind of repetitive, you know. And come Friday, I was a little worried there. I was worried, like, oh no, you know, I'm on air here. Maybe this isn't for me. Is this like the moment where I realize I've spent the last, you know, 1 or 2 years like working towards something to find out that it's not what I want to do? I came back Monday though, and I went through that whole week like a freight train and couldn't get enough of it. And
Wow.
it kind of, that moment there like sold to me, no, yeah, this is what I want to do. I want to get into the studio and get some things together and give people a good couple hours of telling them what's happening in town. And, if we're playing music this hour, we're going to have some good tunes, that's for sure. um, and have a good time. I'm at the very least going to ensure that whoever it is they're hearing come through the airwaves sounds like he's in a good mood. And maybe that will either, one, give them something to complain about because they think, well, why is he having such a good day? Two, they'll think, oh, yeah, no, that is something they hear that they like to hear.
Yeah, it
So,
like rubs off on them, hopefully.
one can only hope,
Yeah. So did you okay, you have a like rhythm when you talk, and you have a voice that it makes sense that you do what you do. You're on the radio. Was that something that you maybe had um like in high school, like do you when you were trying to figure out like why is this guy like, ushering me towards this? Do you think that, like, do you have any sort of like performative streak? Like, were you like sort of, like a class clown, or like did you have a that voice and that delivery like ever since then, or is it something that you like fostered and sort of like worked on?
So from his perspective, I'd say, and he tells this story anytime I'm around him at like a professional event or something, and he's introducing me to someone. He goes, "Yeah, when I met Hack here, he was about this tall, and stiff wind would have blew his 90-pound existence down a couple miles." And he didn't sound like this before. And in fact, no, when this started, I didn't sound like this. Now, by April, I did, but that wasn't just from the podcasting thing. I suppose, throughout my younger years, my mother, she's in a band and does some music. Gravel and Spiders was that act she
Oh
started
wow.
out with.
All right.
And as she would say, it's absolutely terrible. Don't listen to it. But no, just innocent things. I guess I was always one as a kid to, if my mother had her phone out, she could turn on the camera because I'd be saying some absolute nonsense in some funny voice like I'd heard on TV or something
Okay.
like that.
Yeah.
Nothing that ever, really meant anything, though. Nothing that would have produced, I guess, what it is you're talking about. I think, though, from just immersing myself in, maybe hobbies that rely on me being a storyteller, or perhaps in the line of work that it's just affected the way that I speak. I know that early on, I think the reason I was kind of noticed for this was not only because, well, one, I didn't need to be taking the class I was taking, but two, that I could get along with just about everybody and
Gotcha.
talk to
Yeah.
them fine. Even if it didn't sound like this, I could at least carry a conversation with about whoever, so long as they were holding up their end of it.
Hmm.
And that's, something my friends absolutely despise sometimes, is I can and I will talk to anyone about anything, really.
Wow.
Um, it gets me into trouble sometimes, but
Yeah.
no, of course, having been on the air, having done podcasting, having just the things over the past, 5, 6 years, whatever, have contributed to means at which I communicate, is really the best way I can put it. This doesn't just happen to people. You don't start off your freshman year of high school getting on here sounding like Wolfman Jack. You
Mhm.
are probably not very good at it when you start. I mean, definitely not good at it when you start. But as you go along, you develop and you get better. That's the thing with um, something that is kind of repetitive day to day. As a radio DJ, you're basically doing the same thing every day. If you want to, like, really not get into the nitty gritty details, you're doing the same things at the same times each and every day. So if you give up all hope and completely lose sight of the magic of what you're doing, you will stagnate or lose effort, just become completely apathetic. Or each and every day you show up and try to do something a little better. Some days you may mess up, but week by week, month by month, if you look at it like it were a graph or something, if you were looking at the stock market, something like that, you're going to see that over time, and you'll notice, maybe not yourself, that you sound better, that you're able to communicate more effectively over the microphone, and maybe even, just person to person if you're doing an interview, something like that. It is definitely a nose to the grindstone sort of thing,
Hmm.
is why it's so important too that I had that opportunity to, just cover for someone while they were on vacation. That was 2 weeks of unadulterated, there in the studio for that time slot, doing it every day of that week. And that not only was an opportunity for me to, one, actually figure it out if I can stand to do this for an extended period of time, but two, to really highlight, like, oh, it's Wednesday and I'm making the same mistake I made on Monday, or maybe, oh, today I'm going to do this differently. Maybe it'll sound better. Um, and here's the funniest thing too that I think is maybe known, but people don't always say it as if it's like, I don't know, maybe it's just too obvious. But you want to know what a fantastic way to know what sounds good on the radio is?
What's that?
Listening to good radio.
Yeah.
Listening to good radio. Now you can't just listen to a station and do that and understand how it is that that was produced and something like that. But in creative circles and in production circles, there are just better ways to do things, and it's always good to instead of looking to what other maybe DJs do and other stations do and thinking, oh, well, I can't steal that idea. It's at the end of the day, someone who's listening to the radio they're not really listening for you. They're
Hmm.
listening, they were going to be listening to the station anyway, or something
Right.
else entirely. And at any point, if you play a song they don't like too much, they're going to change that station. So at all times, you just have to be giving the best listening experience I feel like you can there on the airwaves. So if you're listening to a station in another town and you hear a certain bit of just production they use for a segue, or if someone has a turn of phrase they use, or a way they introduce a song or a story they tell,
Right.
um, be open and see what it is that others are doing, not to steal the ideas of others, but to
Be inspired.
yeah, take part in the marketplace of ideas, take inspiration and put your own spin on it, and be you on the radio, improve that, and keep growing as someone who is producing something, whether you're podcasting, whether you're making music, whether you're, I mean, anything at all. I feel like is just, I think that's a pretty blanket, you can twist that around in just about anything, honestly. But
And I do like how you mentioned a little bit ago. You're just very personable, and that helps you get along like with pretty much anyone. And it's one of those skills where it sort of it can make you successful in like every industry, by just being like, kind of like well adjusted, but just generally like good meaning and sincere, and having that ability to just, without any bias or anything, just have a conversation with somebody. And it seems like that having a good conversations is what guided you towards what you do now. But I also have another question. I mentioned that because we talked. I think I talked to Isaiah about it a little bit. It's just like being generally just like a good person is a very like good hack at being successful.
oh,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
How hard is it to be kind?
Right.
How hard is it to here's the here's the thing I feel with especially in my situation with how I got to where I am. You hear the phrase all the time, your network is your net worth.
Yeah.
But what does that actually mean? What does networking mean?
Right.
How do you do
It's
that?
something I've struggled with like a lot.
It's about meeting people. Well, how do you go out and meet people? It's what are we talking about, dating here? Like,
Right.
no, but when you are around others, you really, in my experience, the best thing you can do is just be you. Don't put up something because you don't want to. False advertising is a terrible practice. But treat others correctly. It's pretty simple. Which I think, especially in radio, what can happen is that there are instances of some individuals who, when behind the microphone, they're another personality, and that, I don't know, gives people a big head. And,
Hmm.
they go by different names and stuff like that, and they are who
Yeah.
they are. And you know how long I've worked here, what have you. It's just, um,
Right.
there's absolutely no no way that there's an overabundance of being humble and being kind to others and
Hmm.
just being able to get along. A good handshake goes a long way,
Oh
that's for
yeah.
sure.
Well, there's true confidence in oneself, and then there's like a manufactured confidence, and you can choose to rely on either, but it's generally better to maintain a truthful, authentic one, because that's what actually, if you're being sincere about it, it's a huge source of strength. And
Mm.
the having that like lack of fear, like I'm just gonna talk to this person, I don't care what their reputation is, like seeing everyone as a human being, and you're just going to, confronting that without fear is something that, like, I think a lot of people struggle with, um especially when it comes to like media, because it's so like there's so much pressure, there's so much like social pressure, so much political pressure or whatever. But just being true to yourself, like that, it seems like that's what got you to where you are. And this is a totally different tangent, but I wanted to ask you, how much control do you have over playing songs?
Takes a lot of trust, Brody. It takes a lot of
I would
trust.
imagine.
Believe it or not, I am a stable enough individual to understand that perhaps Marilyn Manson at 3 o'clock in the afternoon on a Wednesday isn't going to fit our format.
Right.
um, I'll tell you this, especially for radio stations that are more focused, you will just know what is acceptable and what isn't when you're there long enough. Um, a really easy example would be with WBRT. We are a country station. That's how it's marketed. The music that plays when there's not other programming is country, and it tends to be more classic country. But in that same vein, really, it's just okay, who listening to this, listening for this music, I mean, what are they going to find acceptable? And you can push that envelope, some, if you've got something that would really maybe fall more into folk, or maybe you've got something that is, not quite country but sounds country enough. Really, it is important to play something that somebody isn't going to hear and think, "Oh my gosh, somebody should lock these people up." That's the first thing.
Yeah.
I know I went out of my way when I did a show in the afternoons on WBRT, said country station, to seek out music that we didn't always play and utilize that for our programming. Of course, there are hurdles you have to jump through there, but then it's more so a important thing where you want to spotlight what it is that you're doing so that people know that maybe this isn't one, the usual, or two, uh, you're not just slipping us in there and trying to make them feel stupid for not realizing this is what kind of station it was. If you play a song that has never met the airwaves for your station before, you make sure to, we call back sell it. So let's say we had a 3 song set of music, and I had some Tim McGraw and then like Eddie Rabbit playing, and then I decided I was going to throw in Old Crow Medicine Show or something in there. And towards the end of that track, and as it's coming down, I'll make sure to tell them what that song was and who it was by, and saying playing something different for you here this afternoon on WBRT, what have you. Requests are things that do exist for radio stations, and some people take them, some people don't, and time to time you may or may not. Um, and sometimes you have to tell people no. You'd be surprised the amount of folks who at 11 o'clock in the morning on WOKH want to hear some Zach Bryan. And I'm thinking, you could just turn your radio dial to 97.1 later in the day, get something a bit like that. But, it's not kind of the station we are there.
Mhm.
There is a great deal of trust in DJs to do what they're supposed to in that regard. Historically, that's never been the case 100% of the time. There's plenty of times where record companies have been quite angry at DJs for playing things that they shouldn't. The public absolutely loves it, though. The problem is that the public isn't always what pays for us to do what
Mm.
we do.
So the record labels get mad at songs playing. Like what would they not want played?
So I'll give you an example here is if a band sends a tape to a DJ for something that they haven't put out yet. So you have to think for
Ooh, wow.
a record company makes money off of the music sales.
Yeah.
So if you are putting music out there onto the radio that either one, you didn't give them enough money for, or two, they didn't want to show off yet because they wanted to be the first to get the
Mm,
lion's share of
yeah.
attention for it.
Or like
Um,
unreleased tracks, I would assume. Like,
yeah, things like that. Now, it's not always an issue. Sometimes it's a non issue. Other times you do have, like, I can't name you any specific examples because I'm not only just terrible with remembering those sorts of events and stuff like that, but they're also, not that important to mention, honestly. But yeah, DJs sometimes they get their hands on some stuff and they're like, "We're gonna play this," and they may get a phone call later. It's like, "What did you do?"
so is it against the law, or is it just um, like can you get in trouble for like releasing that into the airwaves?
It
Or
depends. It depends on what you put out there.
yeah.
Maybe less so specifically songs, but for anyone who gets involved in radio, there will be a name that you don't want to say 3 times in the mirror, and that is the FCC.
Yeah.
Which, of
Wow.
course, they have quite a bit of paperwork they'll have you do now and again to make sure you're doing what you're supposed to. And if you're not, um, either keep the door locked or put on a smile whenever someone in a suit walks through that you don't recognize.
Yeah, absolutely, man.
It's a scary thing, and I can tell you right now that a lot of radio stations throughout the United States, if they're not the large, long-standing ones that have existed in our big cities for a while, and that sort of thing, they're probably either ran by smaller corporations that don't apply the correct level of care to the stations they own, or they are locally owned stations or more community and public access sort of deals that you know God forbid the federal government reared its head over these things, because there would simply be hell to pay for the fact that these aren't places where it's a tight ship. Stuff is running as best as it can,
Mm.
to just get something out on the airwaves. That's for sure. Um, so there's a lot of trust in DJs to not get on there and say something that's going to get the station in trouble. You're not
Right,
only
right.
representing yourself when you're on the air, you're representing the station as a whole, but also your advertisers as well, which is a big deal. It'd be very strange to say some off-kilter stuff and then this segment was brought to you in part by,
Right, right.
you're throwing them under the bus as well. And that's where you start having people not paying for advertising and
Mm.
not wanting to do stuff with your station or with you. Um, Luckily, there hasn't been any such horrific events that I know of recently for our our little
Well, that's
setup.
great.
Um,
So when you guys have like when you play music, is it a physical setup? Like, do you have like physical copies of the music, or is it like digital?
so, actually, I want to ask you a question real quick.
Yeah.
So what do you picture then for someone playing music at a radio station? Do you
You
see
know,
like the turntables and
well,
things
like
like
in the
that,
back of
or
my head, there's some kind of like apparatus that like, you press a button and then like a mechanical arm like
like
goes
a
and yeah,
jukebox?
like grabs a CD or something but like obviously that brand hasn't been that way in forever probably. And nowadays I would imagine it's way easier to just do Spotify or something.
Well, so here's the important thing. So when you say Spotify, you as a consumer are paying for a license to use this program in order to use its
Yeah,
subscription
yeah.
service. But putting something out on the airwaves is a whole nother deal, and that requires what we, I guess, what you would call licensing, permission to use that music, basically. Now, law regarding music is a fantastic case study in how the law was not written for people and was written for the racket, I guess we can call, I don't know, law firms and court
Yeah, yeah.
systems. No, it's a mess. It's a nightmare. But to answer your question, so I've obviously only been involved in radio for so long, and I'm not that old. But back in the day, maybe we did have some large machines that, reel to reel stuff. And even still at certain stations, I know for us, we can still use CDs. We have lots and lots and way too many CDs, and we have the means to put that out on the air. There are some stations, I believe WFPK in Louisville, which is part of LPM's Louisville Public Media. I believe they can at times put vinyl on the airwaves if they so choose
Wow.
to do so. But for the most part, for your day to day, and really most of the time, all of it's handled through computer systems. We, for instance, have a system that we use, which is uh, created by a company that then sells that system to be used by stations. And it's, you get what you pay for. You're not using some application you could have downloaded on Windows. It comes with a whole, they basically send you the box, and it's all, based in Linux, and it's a system that synchronizes well with your other programs you need to run a radio station well. And that music is in a database, and it has all the metadata in there, like song titles and names and lengths and just other stuff you'll need for the production of it.
So it's like an internal server, kind of, or
Yes, no, exactly. It is a server. Yeah.
okay.
So it's a server or a cloud that contains all of it, basically.
Okay.
Do we have physical copies of music, though? Yeah, lots and lots of it. Do we use it a lot, though? No. It's, for the most part, all, in a cloud. It's way easier for me to, if I want to play some Smashing Pumpkins next instead of, whatever else, to just type that into the system and pull that from the cloud and put that up next rather than go and look for a copy
Right,
of
right.
Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness or
Yeah,
whatever
yeah,
in the
yeah.
back. Um,
Right. Is when it comes to licensing, so you can't play anything unreleased. You can't like agitate the record companies. So other than that, can you technically play anything that's been officially released as long as it's like within the brand of the radio station?
Well, so here's the important thing is that a lot of times smaller stations, really, I mean, lots of stations utilize networks that handle licensing.
Okay.
So there are larger networks which handle some of that bigger stuff. So our catalog of music is incredibly large, and it is part of a network that is used by all sorts of different stations. So they have basically all the licensing we could ever want to play what we want. However, the database, the cloud, whatever, is only so large. It can only have so much going on with it at once. So, one day you may think, oh man, I really need to play this new song. And you go to pull it up and it's not there yet. Or, something that was in the system that you haven't played for like 5 years is suddenly not in the system anymore. There's a level of programming that is handled purely by, lawyers who get that stuff figured out. They're the ones who can handle getting that music into these, into our hands basically. But also you have down the pipeline, are the songs we want actually getting to us. I suppose in a way, I can't play absolutely anything. We do have to at times tell people no on requests, but also, if somebody brings me a CD, I can put it on. If somebody brings me a CD of a song that I know is not going to get us in any trouble and isn't going to be hurting anybody, if it's a small band that wants to put something on.
Right. Yeah, I was gonna ask that. Like, do you have local bands ever?
Just yesterday I played a song, a fantastic track that sounds incredible. Should Have Known Better by a little group called Project Phoenix, and they're actually out of Columbus. And they just have like one album, and
Mm.
I got my hands on some of that and put it out on the airwaves yesterday because it's not only just music that the people, our listeners, haven't heard, but it's good too. Is the important thing, and highlighting smaller artists is always good. It's
Oh,
always good
absolutely.
to throw interest their way. Um, we have all sorts of local artists out and about the place. There's a guy I went to high school with who was putting out some music for a year or two ago, and whenever he put it out, I made sure to play it on our country station because it fit the format. And, there's just not hurt anybody. Give him some exposure there because it was, some good stuff. So, yeah, with local artists, it's really, I think the hardest part of doing that is just either getting your hands on the media itself or finding the time to talk to them in the studio. Um,
Right. How does your station feel about like the rap country stuff, like Old Town, like the Old Town Road thing? Like, I mean, I know that's like pretty dated now, but like, they do they mess with that at all, or are they like, nah, that's not really our brand?
well, so um, there is no there
Is
is
it
no
divisive? I would imagine it's like divisive.
it it's not so much what we think, it's more
Right.
so what the listeners think.
Right.
That's the important thing. I'm not going to get on to our country station and play Jelly Roll because I guarantee you that half of our listeners are folks who are completely confused as to why he's part of the Opry. Do I have any issues with Jelly Roll being in the Opry? No. Do I think it's funny that every time he gets up on stage to accept something, he looks like he's giving an Oscar-winning performance? Sure, but no. We've not played any Lil Nas X on our country station. But when you say like country rap, it's like you think, okay, well, what about, Dirt Road Anthem? Like there are some segments of that song there where, it's sounding a little more flowy like, hip hop or something than it is a country song. He's certainly doing a little more of that than actually singing. Um, it varies. You really just have to have a abundant knowledge of music itself and be able to have like interacted with the sound of your station and your listeners enough to have a idea of what's going to sound right.
Hmm.
If it's not going to sound completely out of place, then generally it's okay. At the same time, you can't control the fact that maybe somebody just can't stand Tim McGraw for no reason, and they're just going to change the station when it comes
Right.
on and turn back later.
It's very subjective, I would imagine.
It is incredibly subjective, which is, it's not a difficult part of our job, but it certainly is an active part of our job. It's really more so a just like keeping it in mind and thinking about it, but it's also a mindset that you can't really explain. It's difficult to, just sit someone down and train them on it. They have to be exposed to it and come to understand what they can and can't play on a station, basically.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. This is a random question. Do you like have fans?
do I have fans?
Yeah.
So this is actually a conversation I had with a coworker of mine recently. I've not been recognized in public, which is something that you know,
Wow.
that's one thing. Is like, okay, well, people don't know what you look like. Well, I talk to people. Oh, okay, well, maybe you just haven't been around anyone that like knows what you sound like. It's like, no, I think I'd sound a little different when I'm on air.
Yeah.
And I also think that the thing people don't realize is that, radio station reaches a huge like area that can have like thousands of people in it. And not all 50,000 people who live in an area are going to be listening to that station at all times. Maybe some of the people I've spoken to are like diehard WBRT country fans, but they only listen like until 8 a.m. while they're going to work, and they don't
Right.
they
Right.
don't they don't hear me on there then. Um, at the same time, with radio, sometimes you have very little idea who is listening. There are ways stations have to determine their listening audience, um, but none of them are as effective as something that you could find on streaming platforms. Those can easily track how many times someone has just listened to something. Um, it's obviously very different for something that is, radio airwaves. But you can rest assured that there is no time that nobody is listening. There's always someone listening, which is something actually that I don't know how much you've ever listened to the radio, but ideally, when someone's behind the microphone, obviously, when I am, I know that there are lots of people listening to that, but I'm talking to one person. I'm talking to the proverbial listener, if you would. I'm
Okay.
talking to the
Yeah.
royal listener. This is especially important for, like, say, if you're doing something that is, just you're DJing some music, you're not coming on there saying, like, hey, everybody, what have you, you make it more, and this will sound strange, but you make it more intimate.
Yeah.
You're a voice in their car,
Yeah.
you got to be their guy, with the
Yeah.
music coming their way on their station,
Yeah. Yeah.
you are, and sometimes you let the fact that, you're talking to multiple people get the best of you, and you might like say
Yeah.
something like
Like
you
you
all, or
guys.
say, yeah, you
Yeah.
guys, what have you.
Yeah.
Which, if you're lucky and there's multiple people in a vehicle listening, then you're covered there. But
Right.
no, generally, what I've learned is that when you're speaking on the radio, you're talking to the royal one person,
Right.
the listener.
Are you an introverted person, like traditionally, or extroverted?
I struggle really with figuring out what those definitions really mean for somebody,
Right. Right.
because I wouldn't say that, like, I think traditionally when people think about extroverts, they think about people who are, like, going out to parties and meeting everybody. And it's like, I'd say I tend to be lower energy, a lot more mellow. But at the same time, I've found that I probably have a much larger social battery than a lot of my peers. That's for sure. I'm usually the person everybody has to tell that no, we're calling it a night here, what have you. Um,
Gotcha.
at the same time, though, maybe sounding more mellow and not going out of my way to, find attention, I can stand in front of a crowd of a couple hundred people and it doesn't
Hmm.
phase me.
Wow.
I've emceed for plenty of events before with, lots of folks out there at their tables watching the stage, and I can't explain it. It's probably just something that I've been completely desensitized to over the years,
Wow.
but it's just,
Wow.
as long as if that microphone's on and I have a rough idea of what I'm going to say, it's, I look to the crowd and, I can hardly see him because of my astigmatism and the lights shining on me. So
That helps.
it works
Probably.
out. Yeah. It's all just one big blur.
So it's your job, and you have become so like comfortable with it. Do you see it as just like I'm just when I'm behind the mic, I'm just doing my job? Like, you've never had stage fright or anything like that ever?
You know, it's always nerve wracking when you're doing something for the first time.
Oh yeah.
That's for sure. But in a situation like, say, being on air through the week for me, it's, I don't think about it that it's just my job, but I can approach it with that level of confidence and comfort that just another day on the job,
Mm-hmm.
Um, even still, me getting behind the microphone is less about me and it's more about the listener.
Mm-hmm.
It's about the listener, and what it is that I'm about to do for, say, the next hour on a show is for them. It's something that we are producing for them, and so I have to keep that in mind before any of my thoughts about how my job is.
Mm-hmm.
um, I could suddenly have a terrible change of heart in a moment, as though a message from God came to me that I shouldn't be in radio anymore, that I need to go far away and find a new vocation. But at the same time, I'm going on air in a minute. It's like, I mean, I got to do this. Somebody's
Mm-hmm.
got to do this. So you turn the microphone on and you act like you're having a great time and you provide the service, because radio is a public service. It's,
Yeah.
even if it is privately owned, you, by the mercy of the federal government, are able to operate on that airwave, and you are actively giving something to the listening public, is the deal.
Yeah, absolutely. Is it so do you find yourself like if people that you're working with are having a bad day or you're having a bad day. It's just like there's this just like power through it like mentality that you have to come to it with.
There should be.
Yeah. Have you noticed anybody ever like let it contaminate
Yes.
their
And I think anyone who's been in radio has been guilty of it. Now, it may not be something where, you know, I get on air and I'm like, I hate being alive or something like that. I don't get on there like,
yeah.
have you ever
Listen.
thought of losing yourself, giving up on everything? No, but
Listen, here's the problem, guys.
I-
Just like, totally.
I can't stand these you make me sick. No, but I might get on there and instead of coming on sounding like, good afternoon, everybody, you're listening to The Rocket 102.7 FM WOKH. I might get on there and be more like, good afternoon, you're listening to The Rocket 102.7 FM
Okay.
WOKH. More tunes coming your way in just a little bit. Stick around right here on your afternoon flight.
Yeah.
I might just have to tone the energy down for myself so that I can do it. But I think just with how long I've been doing it, which admittedly hasn't really been that long compared to some DJs out there, you figure out a way to understand how you're feeling and be able to give what you can on there. No DJ is going to sound the same every day. I was listening to a Louisville station and I could have sworn this woman sounded like this was going to be her last day on earth.
Wow.
It was just, she sounded miserable. And then, the next day she gets on there and it's like, okay, no, one, she just talks like that, but you can tell there's a little bit more of a smile behind that. That's the thing. People can hear a smile. So if you're having a terrible day and you're on the radio, you best get to faking it. You best get to faking that smile while you talk.
That's a good point. Yeah.
You can hear a smile. It is true.
That makes sense. I'll pick that up like when I'm listening to a podcast. It's weird, like you can tell when they're smiling, even though like it seems like they're very dry tone, but like you can tell when one kind of creeps up. I was gonna ask you about time slots. You made it seem like the 8 a.m. Area is pretty like high demand, or there might be like a peak of listeners around that time. Do they plan out the schedule of the day based around like peak times and like allocate who's like the best for that time zone? Like, are people like?
Well, so rarely would you have somebody doing something early in the mornings and then also later in the day. That's one thing.
Right. Okay.
So generally speaking, you've got some of your like most important stuff happening at key times when people will be possibly listening. And when I say important, I tend to mean the highest demand stuff. And there may even still be other things that are like, community favorites that don't happen during these times. But we're talking like what we would call like a morning drive. The morning drive in radio is going to be something that's like, from people when they start getting in their cars at work till when they're walking in that door to go in and clock in. So generally, our morning shows run from 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. is how that goes. And you have, through that course, basically, you're trying to fit in as much as you can for a listener in that time. And it's a whole lot of repeating yourself. I'll say that because people are getting in their cars at different times, that's for sure. People are getting up and getting ready and doing whatever. But it's a whole lot of talking about, we've got forecast for today. Breaking news, this thing happened. We just heard that there's an accident on this road, whatever. Hey, coming up later on, we'll have this program. And later this week, there's this event you should go see at this time, yada, yada, yada. Oh, coming up next, we've got a live interview with so-and-so. You're packing it as much as you can with just so much different stuff, really. Our morning show on WOKH is still lots of music, but we've got lots of, short bits of like breaking news. There's a lot of the throw in several weather forecasts, what have you, and then live interviews. It may vary day by day who's in and who's talking about what, but there'll be somebody else in there, maybe from a charity organization, a business in town to talk about some things. There tend to be regular guests, what have you, that people can come to expect. But in all, it's really just anyone who does a morning show in radio is basically doing the most, if not at times too much, because you have to cram as much as you can in there for that time slot where you're going to possibly catch the most people, is the idea. Then you have other time slots, like, say, your rush hour around like noon or so, or maybe 5 o'clock when people are getting off of work. You also, at times, with back to school now, think about when your local schools are letting out and think that, kids are getting in the car at about 3:30. Maybe I shouldn't play this song at this time. Maybe mom's going to turn the station if this comes on. But also, you think about that as, oh, mom's got the kids in the car. Sponsor's really going to like it if I start to bring up the ice cream parlor while, the kids are in the
Oh,
back seat
wow.
able to hear it.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. I would guess that ads um, care a lot about the time
Time.
slot.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Well, who wants to pay for an ad that's running at midnight?
right.
That'll be something stapled onto your deal. But no, advertisers, they care specifically about times. Certainly, not only do they maybe want to be able to tune in and hear that their ads actually playing, but they want to know that they're catching the right sort of, you know,
Demographic.
exactly. For instance, we've got some restaurants and things where a fantastic time for them to advertise is about 10 and 11 a.m. Because,
Mhm.
you've got somebody on the job site, someone in the office who didn't bring a lunch today. And if that radio's on and they
They hear
didn't they
it.
didn't have their mini wheats this morning and they hear talk about the juicy, succulent, burger at such and such place,
Yeah,
that little devil on their shoulder is going to start talking to them, that maybe they can have a cheat day for their diet and go do such and such.
absolutely.
It's, I mean, I'm just saying, go all morning without eating and be putting in a few hours of actual decent work.
Oh, yeah.
And then right before you leave for lunch, just bombard yourself with advertisements for restaurants. And you're probably going to go out and get something, unless you've got unless you're, I don't know, David Goggins or something. And
Well, I was gonna say, like, I've definitely been manipulated by ads to like get a burger, and it may not have been like a burger from the exact place that they want me to go, but it was a burger nonetheless. Like
Well,
a
so the thing about radio advertising too is consistency. That
oh, okay,
somebody's going to hear that ad and they keep hearing it. That they keep hearing an ad now and again.
mm,
Now, it may not be, oh my gosh, this one again, like every hour. Oh,
yeah,
but every once in a while they hear that same little jingle in their head.
mm-hmm,
And so then suddenly, you're my age and you hear someone, you think about jewelry for a moment. And if you've lived in the Louisville area, this has probably also happened to you, where you think about jewelry. And if your parents listen to radio in the car, you think about having a friend in the jewelry business, Shane Company on Hurstbourne Parkway and Taylorsville Road. That's, they're little earworms that never come out.
yeah.
Um,
I have a lot of those just from TV. I think that are stuck in my head. But so with your station, does it like when you say morning show? I know some of the stations around here they'll have like talk show like programs. Mostly like the morning, probably throughout the day. Like I know we have Bob and Tom here, which is like really popular. I don't know.
Syndicated, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's
Um,
played all across the United States. Yeah,
yeah. Which I kind of
it fell off.
it did. I
It's
didn't.
just not as good as it used to be.
I
It's an
I
open
haven't
secret.
listened in a long time. I
It's,
used to
it's
love it.
true. Oh
I'm
yeah, no. I mean, when's the last time you listened to Bob and Tom?
right. I mean,
And
yeah.
it's not going to sound the same as it once did. It's
Hmm.
the sad truth. It's the
Right.
sad truth.
Does your station do anything like that? And have you been given any opportunities to have like a back and forth sort of talk show, like um, be involved in that at all?
So we have programs like that, and some of them are a little different than others. First of all, for our morning show, there is usually a segment, maybe about 30 minutes long. It really depends on how much news there was that morning worth talking about. Um, I know that our morning DJ on WBRT, Jamie, as well as our owner Roth, have a bit of a talk segment on there. and it's all in good fun. They do some giveaways, things like that, and just talk about all sorts of different things. But then we have from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m., Jamie does a sports show. And on that program, he usually has someone else there talking with him. I actually got one of my buddies from high school, Big Easy, who is currently serving as a noble deputy jailer in Nelson County. But
wow.
there in the mornings, he connects through some equipment and remotely is able to carry on a back and forth conversation about what's happening in sports. And Jamie certainly has some fun with it. He gets into it. That's for sure. And there's always opportunities in the mornings for people to have guests in. But as for consistent like co-hosts, that is a prime example. There we have two of them that sort of alternate. We have one at the beginning and end of the week. An older gentleman comes in who's one of those too old to care anymore types. And then again, a younger but somehow more voice of reason gentleman who's on now and again with our man Jamie. I myself host the show that follows directly after at 10. And I am honored to host it. However, I have seen this show be the last show that people have hosted a few times in a row because it is a legendary thing in small town radio. And not just specifically, obviously, what we do, but the fact that it is a concept that exists all throughout the United States with radio stations. It may go by different names. We call it the party line. Some people call it swap shop, tradio, what have you. But here's the thing, Brody, is that I'm coming home from work one day and I'm just decompressing and I think to myself, man, this morning a man really called the party line. I answered. I go, hey, good morning. You're on the party line. What can we do for you? And he goes, I've got a sheep that's missing. I got a sheep got out on Bloomfield Road. If anybody's seen it, you call me at this number. And I've also got I got some zucchini I'm looking to sell, fresh zucchini. You come pick it yourself. You call me at this number. And I think to myself, in that moment, I didn't bat an eye. I didn't think, this is ridiculous. There is a man genuinely calling the radio station saying, y'all, my sheep's got out if anybody's, but it is an hour of programming where people call the station, and if they've got something they're looking to buy, something they're looking to sell, something they're looking to trade, it's their destination to
So
do
it's like
so.
it's like the newspaper like ad section
Precisely.
of like the radio
So,
world.
you've got somebody calling saying, hey, I've got a couple of lawnmowers I've been fixing up if anybody's interested. Or you got someone who's like, hey, I've got this microwave I'm looking to get rid of, what have you. We've got a Frigidaire air conditioning unit here. It's a nice BTU on it. It works all right. I've got a car here. It's got 300,000 miles on it. It's a 2001 Ford. It's got a little bit of damage. It's got no battery, whatever, and the windshield's broken. I'll take $6,000 for it.
So you host an hour of that, like taking those calls?
There are commercial breaks, and we have a few other things in the segment, obviously. This is a very high-demand show. Not only you have the people utilizing the service of the show, but a lot of people listen to this because it can get ridiculous at times. It's also just, sometimes people listen to it because they're thinking they might actually find something like, I don't know, for their living room or something like that. There's, all sorts of stuff that goes on that program.
But can you call for like pretty much no reason and just have some like weird, crazy like things to say? Or is it specifically for
Generally, it's for that, but we've had plenty of instances where it didn't go quite that way. I want to actually, take a moment here to almost, look upwards toward the heavens here. We recently lost a man in our community by the name of the Coca-Cola Cowboy is what he called himself.
Okay.
No one knows why this was his nickname, why he called himself that, but, you'd run into him at the local Walmart, and he'd talk to anyone. You know who I am? I'm the Coca-Cola Cowboy. And he'd probably been calling that show for 50 years.
Jeez.
Every single day. He'd get on there and, depending on who it was hosting it. So, for myself, you go, "Oh, hey there, brother," and he would just yap, yap, and yap. He'd have something like for the show, like maybe he's like, "I'm looking for a deep freeze," or "I've got this guitar I'm looking to sell." He never sold that guitar. He passed before he could.
Ah,
Um,
damn.
but he was a public figure that people listened for to hear him.
Wow.
And he got on there, and at times it was a little too much. At times it was too much. Sometimes he called too often. Um, but everybody who has some compassion in their hearts, misses him in
Oh,
a
yeah.
sense, because
Of course.
he never meant anybody any harm. But then also you've got the other end of the spectrum here where somebody had you can actually send in messages, text messages to the station number that we use for it. And it's less of a fun interaction and more so just me reading what someone said, but it's a service people utilize nonetheless. And at one
How much
point,
would that cost to do that?
to do what?
To like, is it free just to send a message for you to read, or would you
Oh,
have to pay
well,
for that?
okay. So, Brody, if someone sends in a message that says some horrible stuff, I'll read it if it's funny. But, like you're not paying for a service that I have to do.
Okay.
But no one's paying any money to send in their listings to the station
Right,
there.
right.
Now, obviously, we're not going to advertise, we're not going to give a business free advertising. But, at the same time, if there's a retired gentleman who's wanting to get a couple lawns to cut for the season, we'll put that out there for him.
That's very cool. I don't know if we do anything like that. I don't know if Nick has ever heard of anything like that. I feel like that's not. I've never heard of like it's like a Craigslist.
Yes,
Sort
it's
of thing.
definitely a very rural thing.
Yeah.
That's for sure. But we obviously have a great deal of listeners in the city we live in, and then of course a few other smaller ones. And to call these cities, these are they are not urban landscapes, by any means. And so obviously the listening landscape of a place like Cincinnati is going to be different. But it's absolutely a public service, no matter how ridiculous it can be at times and how some people may try to game it, abuse it, or I was saying we had someone use this text service to they sent in a message. They had sent in a listing earlier in the show, and they just sent another message. They were like, "Man, really missing the Coca-Cola Cowboy right now." And
Oh,
I read that
wow.
message because
Wow.
it was very kind. And then about 5 minutes later, we had an older gentleman call. He goes, "Oh, somebody said they miss the Coca-Cola Cowboy. I sure don't." And then he like hung up before I could even say anything. And I did my best not to like humor what it was that he said. But everyone who had something to say about it made their feelings known for the rest of the show. Because
Wow.
that guy, no idea who he was. I've not heard his voice on the radio since then, though,
Oh,
because he
man.
got dragged for it. Like, there's immediately, frame one, a man who hadn't even called for like weeks and weeks. He called in, he's like, "Ryan, I just want to say good morning. I don't have anything for you, but that man, he should be ashamed of himself." Whatever. It's like,
Oh,
I'm
God.
thinking, why would you get out on this community program and make a fool of yourself like that? If no one's laughing, having a good time about it, it's all
So-
well and to be a fool, but to say something terrible like that on the airwaves is just there's no sense in that.
You're talking about the guy who criticized Coca-Cola Cowboy?
So yeah, so the guy he got
Yeah.
on there and he said, "Oh, I sure don't miss him."
Yeah.
It's like, why would you do something like that?
Yeah, it seems like they take a little bit of pride. It's almost like a public forum sort of thing.
Yeah.
And it's like,
It is so, as advertised, it is for this sort of marketplace to exist. But
yeah.
it is, in a sense, yes, a bit of a forum. Because also, too, if there is breaking news at this time, I mention it. If there's something I feel like worth mentioning, if I'm not drowning in listings that I'm wanting to put out there, I'll share that stuff. And we also have advertisers who do things like call in and get their own phone call for a little bit. local establishments to talk about their deals for the day and things like that, or
Mm,
if they're looking for some to hire some folks, things like that, or just what's happening.
okay.
Um,
That's pretty cool. I like the idea. Nick, yeah, I was gonna ask you, how are we on
Coming up on an hour and a half.
Really?
Yes, so
Okay.
I could put this in an hour and a half time slot. Is there anything you really want to say?
Can I just do one more question and then wrap it up?
No, I was just letting you know. We got an
All
hour
right.
and a
I
half.
was just about to ask you, how are we on time? But yeah, sorry it
No,
took
you're
going so long.
you're fine. And then there's stuff. Obviously, I'll trim some other things to make it fit. But we have time for maybe one more question
Okay.
and then like a closing statement.
Gotcha.
Cool. So far, so good. I'm loving it.
All right, awesome. All right, so last question, man. And thank you again for doing this with us for free, this volunteer thing. Um, what advice would you have for somebody that, we talked about it being a dream job. If somebody is really like pining for wanting to do something like this, or like having like a media job, or talking to people for a living, like what would you advise for them as just a general takeaway?
um, you know, at first, it has to do with expectations, not only for yourself, but for what you're going to be doing really for the next few years when you're getting into this sort of thing. When you start out at a place like a radio station and you've not worked in radio before, I wouldn't expect to get in front of that microphone very quickly. If anything, if you're starting at a radio station without much at all radio experience and a week or two in, you're already, you know, trying to do that job, maybe the place you've got onto the boat with here is in a bit of dire straits. But in a scenario where you find yourself in a place where there is an opportunity to get involved with this form of media where you feel like you could, really belong, the important thing is that I find time and time again in specifically the radio industry that uh, ourselves who work in it, we either are on two ends of a spectrum where we go, "Oh, that's good enough," or we go, "Oh, it's not enough," and you get real frustrated. Um, Absolutely, like if you can go through an ego death before you get into radio, I would recommend it.
Wow.
But don't think about yourself. The radio is not about you. It is not about any DJ. I don't care who it is, because I said his name earlier, but Wolfman Jack wouldn't have meant anything if nobody listened to him. So you go into a situation where you're working at a radio station, and the reality is that you need to be doing your part to keep this thing running for the public service that it is providing. That means if today you've got to scrub the toilets because the person who's supposed to be doing it isn't there, and everybody else is out doing, their on-air stuff or recording news or getting other things done, you do what needs to be done. You humble yourself, you sort through thousands of pages in a filing cabinet if that's what needs to get done. You sort through dusty old equipment that hardly works to find the right piece to make this thing work at the last minute because you need to get this program on for the people who were promised that this program is going to get on. Not just your advertisers, but the listeners you've been telling all about it. Because it's a terrible feeling to be told, hey, you've got this coming up at 7 o'clock, and it not happen. You think, why did I waste my time listening to this lousy station?
Mm.
So if you're wanting to get in with radio, I think it can be daunting at first to think about, a station's going to expect this and this and this from me. But I think the reality is that a lot of places around here are in need of help when it comes to just our radio landscape here in the United States anymore. And it's not going to start out as you being on air. If you're not, familiar with this industry, you're not going to be in front of a microphone for a while.
Yeah.
But
So it's like more important than the glamour of it is the work ethic that you put into it.
you are a public servant when you are on air.
Yeah.
And it's the darndest thing where, I think in certain places where people should be public servants, far too often, they act like celebrities and they're treated like that. And that's kind of the environment we're in now. And in radio, the reality is yes, you are providing a public service, but they want you to act like a celebrity about it. But you do that in front of the microphone when someone's in front of you shaking your hand, humble, kind, and treat whatever task is before you to make sure that that listening experience for those listeners is not tarnished, that it comes out the best it can. And you do everything you can in a day to make that happen. And if it's not enough one day, well, you chin up and try it again the next day, because radio, it stays on 24/7. Yeah.
All right. So, Ryan, thank you again for coming, man. Lastly, would you like to plug anything or mention like where to listen to the radio, or, how people can do that?
I'm going to front sell my own station here. Yeah, no, absolutely. Of course. Well, you're in luck because you can catch me live on air in a few different places. But first, the easy thing is open up your phone and open up that Facebook app. You can find us WBRT Radio and WOKH 102.7 FM. The stations, well, you may be hard-pressed to find them up here if you're in the Cincinnati area. If you are in central Kentucky, 1320 AM. 97.1 FM and 94.9 FM in Lebanon, Kentucky to catch WBRT, or 102.7 FM for Bardstown, Springfield, and Lebanon. Probably way easier for you, though, if you check us out on WBRTcountry.com or WOKH.FM, streaming worldwide, anywhere in the world, so long as you've got internet.
Wow. That was good, man. You
Not
really,
my best work.
You're nailing that the broadcaster voice. But thanks again, man. Thank you for coming in. Appreciate it. Thanks for tuning in to Real Talk. I'll see you guys later.